Revenge with Karen. You still writing with those dinosaur pens? Blake barked across the glass conference table, a stupid little smirk curling his lips like he'd just made the joke of the century. Half the room chuckled nervously. The other half looked down, pretending to reread the Q3 forecast they'd already seen 3 times. I didn't laugh. I didn't blink. I just kept my hand flat on my leather-bound compliance binder, one I'd been updating by hand for 22 years, and waited. The new VP of Operations, all 32 smug years of him, leaned back like he was settling into a throne made of other people's experience. We're not in the Stone Age anymore, folks. It's time to digitize. Streamline. Automate. He tapped his iPad like it held the keys to salvation. No offense, Marla, but your scribbles belong in a museum. He actually air-quoted scribbles. Here's the part where I'm supposed to snap back, right? Maybe launch into a monologue about how my scribbles once prevented a 7-figure lawsuit from our Shanghai partner. But I didn't. I'd learned long ago that in rooms like this, silence cuts deeper. So I just smiled, tight, polite, hollow, and stood up. Funny thing, 97% of folks listening to stories like this never hit subscribe. You'd think after hearing how the quiet ones get even. Want more? A simple like or follow really lights a fire under our team. Helps us keep telling the stories corporate America tries to bury. Anyway, I slid the binder closed, worn leather, faded tab dividers, a faint ink smudge on the corner from a panicked Thursday in 09. And on the spine, a single label in all caps, "Do not remove." Blake didn't ask what was in it. He just watched as I walked it, slow, steady, down to the archives room. Top shelf, locked cabinet, keycard access only. I placed it there like a priest shelving scripture. Then I walked back upstairs, cleared my desk, and left before lunch. No HR debrief, no farewell cupcakes, not even a box of my own. Everything worth taking had already been shelved. Blake's official statement hit Slack later that afternoon. Today we say goodbye to a valued legacy contributor as we move toward a modernized future. Let's give Marla a warm round of applause for her years of service. Applause. He used the word applause. By the end of the day, my access was revoked, my parking space reassigned, and my name removed from the compliance knowledge base in the company wiki. Just like that, 22 years vanished under a layer of keyword-optimized nonsense. I got one message that night. From Helena, a junior analyst I'd mentored through her first compliance audit, changing clause libraries without checking legacy protocols. Blake said your binders were redundant. Just thought you should know. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I already knew. Blake thought redundancy was a dirty word. He hadn't learned yet that in compliance, redundancy is just another word for insurance. So I poured a bourbon, lit the citronella candle on my porch, and started a new notebook. First page, Legacy Oversights Watch List. 3 companies, 3 markets, 3 ticking clocks. Let him digitize the soul out of this place. Let him drag and drop his way to disaster. I'd already shelved the warning. Page 1, bold red ink, right where it needed to be. The purge began with a memo. Subject line, Operational Optimization, Phase 2. That's how Blake dressed it up for the company-wide email. He was spring cleaning a damn rec room instead of gutting 2 decades of institutional memory. The body of the message was worse. All non-digitized, legacy documentation poses a security and compliance liability. Effective immediately, physical archives will be reviewed and removed. All departments must report analog materials by EOD Friday. No signatures. No thank you. Just cold, surgical deletion. Compliance floor turned into a war zone. Admins rolled out bins. Teams rushed to scan what they could, tossing anything that smelled like paper older than 2010. One guy found a floppy disk and held it up like an artifact from the Titanic. Another tried to digitize a thermal receipt by emailing it to himself and taping it to his monitor as a joke. They were laughing until legal started calling. See, Blake had fired the memory, but kept the machinery. No one knew how to run it. In the chaos, a college intern named Ruby got dispatched to inventory the archives. Bright-eyed, nervous, probably still had the syllabus for her business ethics class folded in her tote bag. She scanned every row with a barcode app Blake insisted was faster than cross-checking. Then she saw it. Top shelf, black leather, brass corners dulled by fingerprints. One label, centered and loud, "Do not remove." She stared at it longer than she should have, scanned the barcode affixed to the cabinet, hesitated with her hand on the binder's spine, and backed away. Didn't log it, didn't touch it. Later, when Blake asked if the archives were fully processed, she lied and said yes. Something about that label, it didn't feel like a suggestion. It felt like a threat with manners. Meanwhile, I got another email. This time from Diego, junior legal, smart kid with too many tabs open and a tendency to whisper when nervous. Marla, sorry to bother you. Just a quick one. They're modifying contract clauses without cross-referencing legacy protocols, right? That's bad, right? I stared at the message for a full minute, jaw tight. It wasn't the question that bothered me. It was the just a quick one, like he was asking about lunch orders instead of the procedural landmine Blake had greenlit. They weren't reviewing old protocols. They weren't even looking. We're erasing the very map that showed where the cliffs were. I didn't respond to Diego either. Not yet. There's no point yelling down a well. But that night, I pulled out my porch notebook, the one I'd started after Blake's little iPad crusade. I cracked it open beside a fresh bourbon and a bowl of pistachios and started a new section. Active blind spots. Underneath, I listed the 3 high-risk clients I knew had non-standard clauses, ones I'd flagged back in 2015 when their governments changed hands and tried to sneak in new audit terms. One of them, Madrid-based, had a red clause that triggered automatic penalties if blanket language was applied during financial volatility. We danced around that landmine for years, like surgeons operating next to a bomb. Now Blake was doing jumping jacks on top of it. I noted their usual review cycles, cross-checked their fiscal years, and underlined the next key date, Friday, 4:00 p.m. CET, 3 days from now. If he pushed through a standard clause package, especially without legacy compliance checks, they'd breach. Not maybe, not possibly, guaranteed. I didn't warn them. Not because I wanted the building to burn, but because I'd already built the fire escape. Labeled it. Lit it in red ink. They chose to board up the exits. See how modern their streamlined future feels when the lights go out. Thursday morning, 9:00 a.m. sharp, the all-hands began with EDM music and a pre-roll animation that looked like it cost more than my severance package. The projector lit up with the phrase, leaner, faster, smarter. Every letter animated like it was trying to sell crypto. Then Blake strutted out like he was headlining a Vegas residency. Gelled hair, polished shoes, no tie, just a black button-up and ego that stretched wall to wall. The company's branding glowed behind him, slick and sanitized. Team, he beamed, hands open like a game show host. Today marks a turning point. The camera panned to the applauding crowd of department heads, interns, and middle managers, some clapping out of fear, some out of habit. I recognized a few faces. Poor Helena, still trying to smile like she wasn't being dragged into a compliance meat grinder. You've removed the bottlenecks, Blake declared. No more red tape. No more handwritten delays. No more legacy clutter clogging up our forward momentum. On screen, a slide showed a bloated cartoon man labeled OLD system being launched into space by a rocket named Automation. He smiled wider, then dropped the headline. This morning, I greenlit a multinational transfer deal involving our European partners, without the 2-week compliance drag. Did it in under 48 hours. The audience actually clapped. They clapped, like he'd cured IBS. From my porch, I sat in my rickety rocking chair with a paper bowl of dry cat food balanced on one thigh and a sunburned tabby named Rufus on the other. Rufus was purring. I was not. I watched Blake bask in his own spotlight, as if he'd just brokered peace in the Middle East, but I recognized the client name on the bottom ticker of the live stream. Grupo Intesa. Drid, my jaw clicked. Rufus paused his chewing to glance at me, as if sensing the atmospheric pressure shift. I reached for my glass and took a long sip. Let's see how you handle Madrid, I muttered. See, Blake's fancy new deal skipped the compliance drag for reason. It bypassed legacy review entirely. Because if he had looked at my notes, he'd have known that Grupo Intesa had a buried clause, Clause 7.3, tied to volatile currency margins. Triggering it meant breach penalties, asset freezes, and automatic audit escalation. But Blake didn't know that. Blake thought all clients were spreadsheets, that history was noise, that my binders were cute. Back on the stream, he wrapped up with a phrase that almost made me spit out my bourbon. We're not just modernizing, we're future-proofing. Future-proofing. Lord help us. Cut to a blooper reel of old system woes featuring dramatic reenactments of people tripping over filing cabinets and shaking fists at printers. Laughter echoed through the office like a funeral for common sense. But beneath that synthetic optimism, I saw the cracks. Helena didn't laugh. Diego, the junior lawyer, looked down, chewing his lip. Ruby, the intern, blinked nervously every time archive was mentioned. The air wasn't confident. It was caffeinated and cornered. Blake, he was already celebrating a touchdown with his back to the field. That afternoon, Slack channels lit up with congratulatory emojis and motion graphic gifs of champagne corks popping. Blake posted a selfie from his office with a caption, "Legacy is dead. Long live the future." By nightfall, Grupo Intessa's automated systems had already flagged the language in the new contract. It was subtle. A single passive alert to their risk office. Clause 7.3. Trigger detected. Escalation pending. Of course, no one at Blake's level would see it. Not until it screamed, "Me, I saw it coming 3 days ago." So I poured another bourbon, scratched behind Rufus's ears, and opened my notebook to a new page. Thursday ignition. Tomorrow was Friday. And that meant fallout. Friday night, 6:42 p.m., the office was half empty and fully drunk on Blake's Kool-Aid. He stood in front of a small war room screen surrounded by sycophants, index finger jabbing the air like a boy playing CEO in front of a mirror. "Run it," he said. "We're green across the board." That green came from a dashboard that lit up like a Christmas tree when no one questioned it. A clean interface with perfect little check marks. Of course it looked good. He designed the metrics after gutting the actual standards. The deal was a cross-border transfer, $72 million spread across 5 markets, timed to exploit a volatile euro-to-dollar swing. On paper, it was genius. In reality, it was a blindfolded base jump. The protocols, default templates, no red flag clauses, no manual cross-checks, no Marla. I wasn't watching this time. I didn't need to. I already had it scribbled down in ink the color of dried blood. Friday execution window. Grupo Intesa clause breach probable. I'd seen that clause enough times to know the trigger by heart. Any rapid multi-currency shift, without custom writer language, would flag them into freeze mode. It was built to protect them from whiplash in bad faith trading. And Blake, in all his lean glory, had just leaned right into it. Saturday, 9:13 a.m. EST, my burner email pinged. Subject: Grupo Intesa payment halt initiated body. Clause 7.3 breach immediate audit freeze per section C. No emojis, no drama, just silence spelled out in legalese. By noon, payment confirmations failed to process through their Madrid office. The transfer backfed into escrow purgatory. Blake, of course, thought it was a banking delay. He told finance to circle back Monday. Saturday night, 8:52 p.m., another ping. It's time from a Swiss account tied to our second oldest legacy partner, Baring plus Koch AG. They had concerns regarding duplicated risk language found in a contract Blake had personally signed off on. Language that should have been sunsetted in 2017. Action. Freeze initiated. Internal legal pending escalation. By Sunday morning, our third domino dropped, Van der Sloot Holdings out of Rotterdam. I didn't even bother opening the email. The subject line said enough. Non-compliant language detected suspension, enacted 3 red flags, 3 legacy clients, 3 ghosts Blake thought he'd exorcised by deleting paper. At 3:12 p.m. on Sunday, my phone buzzed. Not a text, not an email, a voicemail, from a number I hadn't saved but recognized instantly. Ron Whitaker, ex-CFO. He hadn't spoken since the company retreat in 2018 when I caught him mixing up EBITDA and net margin during a tequila-fueled fireside chat. His voice was slower now, less smug, more cracked. "Marla," he said, the static humming between syllables like the line itself was nervous. I'm just gonna ask it. Did you know this would happen?" He paused. You could hear papers shuffling. Someone coughing behind him. He was calling from a boardroom. "'Cause I'm looking at clause references in your handwriting right now." And Jesus Christ, this wasn't even hidden. It was labeled, red ink, page 1. I didn't answer, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew the next call wouldn't be a question. It would be a request. I stared out at my backyard. The citronella candle had burned down to waxy sludge. Rufus was pawing at a dead moth, and in my notebook, next to Friday execution window, I drew a line. Beneath it, I wrote, Saturday trigger pulled, then Sunday contagion. They'd pulled the wrong thread. Now the whole suit was unraveling. Monday hit like a body bag. 7:14 a.m., the boardroom filled early, lights dimmed, coffee untouched. Suits shuffled in, ties crooked, eyes bloodshot from a weekend of spreadsheets, legal threats, and we need to talk emails from billion-dollar clients. The mood? Clinical panic. The kind where no one screams, because screaming would confirm the building's already on fire. CFO Patel was first to speak. He didn't even open his laptop. $40 million, he said, voice flat. That's what we've lost in active contract value since Friday night. No one breathed. Grupo Intesa, frozen. Bearing plus Cock, suspended. Vandersloot, gone dark, and is already talking to competitors. Blake, seated too close to the whiteboard like a student about to be scolded, swallowed so hard you could hear it in the hallway. His gelled hair now looked like it had lost the will to live. He tried. I was under the impression those clients were cleared through the new risk filters. I mean, we ran the protocols. The dashboards were green. Patel held up one hand. The universal sign for shut it. We ran your protocols, Blake, and they didn't account for clause exceptions that date back to 2014. CEO Langston, who hadn't spoken yet, finally leaned forward. Calm, deadly. The kind of voice people remember at funerals. Were these clients reviewed under our legacy compliance notes? The air changed. You could hear the HVAC system click on. Someone shifted in their chair. No one answered. Langston scanned the room. Blake blinked furiously. Those notes were, we transitioned to the new system in Q2. The legacy materials were deemed obsolete. Langston didn't blink. Obsolete, he asked, folding his hands, or inconvenient? And then, like a match dropped into dry hay, someone in the corner murmured, the binder. It was Ruby, the intern. She was only in the room because her manager had panic rescheduled her onboarding review and dragged her in to learn by watching. She hadn't planned to speak, but her voice broke the room like glass. I saw it, she said, last month. In the archive room. Label said do not remove, black leather, top shelf. Now everyone was staring at her. Even Blake. Langston turned to Patel. Do we still have access to that room? Patel nodded. Physical keycard entry. Archives haven't been fully cleared. Langston stood, get it. Blake opened his mouth to say something but stopped. Maybe it was the silence. Or maybe it was the realization that the ghost he'd tried to bury wasn't gone. Her name hadn't been said once. Not out loud. But it haunted the boardroom like fresh blood under bleach. Her absence was now louder than Blake's excuses. Langston left the room without another word. Behind him, Blake just sat. No more dashboard lingo, no lean initiative talk, just the weight of $40 million in preventable losses and a binder he'd laughed at before throwing out the woman who wrote it. Ruby sank into her chair. She looked like she wanted to disappear. And outside that boardroom, in a cabinet they'd almost gutted for scrap, single binder waited on a shelf under fluorescent lights, its spine still warning in thick black Sharpie, do not remove. Nobody laughed anymore. The door to the archive room hissed open with a reluctant hum, like even the building knew what was about to be unearthed. Langston stepped in alone. No assistants, no cameras, no Slack status update saying stepping away. Just the CEO of a $900 million company walking into the graveyard of what he'd let be discarded. The light flickered once overhead, then stabilized. Metal shelves lined the walls like silent jurors. Folders, backup drives, a few dusty hard hats from when the company thought on-site meant something. And there, on the top shelf, sat the binder. Black leather, brass corners, a spine label that hadn't faded, do not remove. Langston didn't hesitate, reached for it, slid it out slowly, like it might detonate. The weight of it, literal and metaphorical, pulled at his wrist. He carried it back to the boardroom like a priest returning with a forgotten scripture. The moment he re-entered, the room snapped to attention. No one spoke. Blake sat up straighter, but his fingers tapped a nervous rhythm on the table's edge. Langston opened the binder. Page 1. Red flag clients' non-standard protocols and trigger clauses typed headers, subsections in careful, consistent script. Names highlighted in amber marker. Grupo Intesa, Madrid, Bearing plus Cock AG, Zurich, Vandersloot Holdings, Rotterdam, each had a bullet-pointed section. Risk clauses, red flag keywords, contact preferences, cultural sensitivities, mitigation strategies. All written in a style Blake had once mocked as crayon scribbles. But no one was laughing now. Langston flipped to the Madrid page. Neon sticky note had been affixed at an angle. In block letters, Madrid do not use blanket clause 7.3. Breach risk. Escalate before proceeding. Below it, circled in red ink, a hand-drawn triangle with 3 letters inside, ESC, Marla's shorthand for escalation protocol. Patel leaned forward, visibly pale. That note predates the new system by 3 years. Blake cleared his throat. It's not that we didn't value the legacy materials. It was just no official transition workflow in place to cross-reference. Langston raised a hand. Sharp, final. Stop. Blake closed his mouth. You had this information, Langston said slowly. It was here. You chose to replace it with untested automation, rush a foreign deal, and delete the only warning system we had. But the dashboards, Langston's voice sharpened. Get out. No yelling, no drama, just a verdict. Blake looked around the room as if anyone, might save him. But all he saw were executives looking down, interns looking traumatized, and a binder that had just gutted him with a single page. He stood, legs shaky, and left without a word. Langston sat back down and looked at the binder like it was radioactive. Then, to Patel, find out what else is in here. Patel nodded slowly, already pulling the binder toward him like it was a defibrillator for the company's last remaining reputation. In the corner, Ubi whispered she wrote all of that by hand. No one answered, but they all knew who she was. Marla hadn't been gone that long, but her absence had just cashed out $40 million in regret, and they'd only read one page. It was 7:06 a.m. Tuesday morning when my phone lit up, screen still crusted with cat hair from Rufus knocking it off the nightstand. I let it ring twice before answering. No number saved, just instinct. Hello. Voice on the other end was female, tight, practiced. CEO's assistant. I remembered her. Madison. Always wore sharp red heels that clicked like warning shots. Hi, Marla. Mr. Langston would like to meet with you. Immediately. He asked me to say it exactly like that. I didn't ask why. I didn't ask how he got my number. I just said, I'll be there in an hour. I didn't wear a suit. I wore the same navy cardigan I used to wear during quarterly audits, one with ink stains along the sleeve where my pen always bled during high-stress meetings. I figured the ghosts deserved to see me dressed for the funeral they started. When I walked through the lobby, heads turned. Some whispered. One guy near reception nudged his coworker and muttered, "That's her." They didn't say my name, but they didn't have to. I didn't stop. Madison met me at the elevator. No small talk. She just pressed the button for the 19th floor, hands clasped in front of her like she was praying with her knuckles. As we stepped off, I saw Patel in the hallway, holding my binder like it was made of plutonium. He started to speak, then just nodded. That was enough. Langston's office door was open. Marla, he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. No desk between us, just a round table, 2 chairs, and a silver thermos of black coffee already poured into 2 mugs. Mine had a post-it stuck to the handle that read, "No cream, 2 sugars." He'd remembered, or someone had. I sat. He stared at me for a long moment, not calculating, just looking. I should have read it, he finally said. When you left, the binder. Page 1 was sitting right there. I didn't blink. You weren't supposed to. He tilted his head. No, I sipped the coffee, still hot, still bitter. It was written for him, I said, Blake. That's what made it dangerous. I left it so he'd either read it or ignore it. Both paths had consequences. Langston nodded slowly, like he wasn't sure if he'd just heard prophecy or a confession. I didn't bring you here for theatrics, he said, tone lower now. I brought you here to ask what it'll take to fix this. I leaned back, crossed my legs, notebook already in hand. No laptop, no PowerPoint. Just pen and paper, the same tools they'd mocked a month ago. 60 days, I said. Langston arched an eyebrow. To do what? To stabilize compliance, I replied. To rebuild hybrid systems. Manual cross-checks on all legacy clients. Restore archive procedures. Retrain legal on trigger clause handling. And install red flag audits in finance before the next deal cycle. He stared. No desk, I added. No direct reports. I'm not coming back to babysit interns. I'm here to repair a system, not raise another Blake. Silence. Then, title. I shrugged, you pick. Just spell my name right. He nodded once slowly. You have it, I stood. Madison was already at the door. She didn't say anything, but her eyes flicked down to the binder in my hand and then back up. This time, she looked nervous. Patel passed me in the hallway, whispering, everyone's talking about the sticky note. Madrid, they can't believe you flagged it years ago. I didn't slow down. They'll believe more by Friday. Back in the elevator, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored paneling. Hair tied back. No makeup, binder under one arm, and for the first time in weeks, no tremor in my hand. I wasn't back. I was in charge. The memo dropped Wednesday at 8:01 a.m. No fanfare, no email blast, just a quiet Slack notification under #company announcements, sandwiched between a reminder about ergonomic keyboard orders and a recycled motivational quote from some intern's Monday morale slide. Effective immediately, Blake R. will be reassigned to a strategic advisory role focused on non-core expansion initiatives. We thank him for his contributions and look forward to leveraging his expertise in new contexts. Reassigned. The corporate version of go sit in the corner and think about what you've done. It didn't say he'd been demoted, but everyone knew. His office badge was downgraded to floor 7, right between procurement overflow and the HVAC supply closet. His new strategic advisory role came with no team, no budget, and no meetings on the executive calendar. Rumor was, the only thing he'd been asked to advise was how not to handle compliance. 10 minutes after the memo dropped, the next one followed. Please join us in welcoming back Marla Vance as Special Executive Advisor to the CEO. Marla will be overseeing compliance restructuring, legacy systems integrity, and critical risk filtration moving forward. No emojis, no flair, just facts. And yet, that line, Special Executive Advisor to the CEO, landed like a gavel. Not a title, a verdict. I didn't make a speech. I didn't post a photo. I just showed up. 9:00 a.m. sharp, boardroom A, binder in hand. Same one, same red ink, same sticky notes. Same aura of I told you so, though I never said the words. I didn't need to. When I walked in, no one laughed. No more jokes about dinosaur handwriting. No more questions about when we're switching fully to the cloud. Same people who once called my notes redundant now leaned forward like school kids every time I turned a page. First meeting back, I slid a packet across the table, hand annotated, with line-by-line clause notes for every legacy client flagged in our backlog. Half the room didn't know how to react. The other half looked visibly relieved, because for the first time in weeks, someone had an answer that didn't come from a dashboard. My first act was swift. Hybrid compliance system reinstated. All critical deals now required a dual-path review, digital filters, and manual cross-checks. Not optional, not legacy courtesy, mandatory. Legal got a new clause library, one digital, one analog. Hard copies were assigned to floor cabinets, tracked, audited. If you wanted access to risk-flagged clients, you had to read both. IT got mad, said it was inefficient. I said it was losing $40 million in a weekend. They got quiet after that. Finance didn't complain at all. They'd been burning in the aftermath and were happy to see me walk in holding a fire extinguisher. Patel personally stopped by to say thank you. He looked like a man who'd been handed a parachute mid-freefall. As for Langston, he never micromanaged. Not anymore. Learned the hard way that trusting the wrong person to automate judgment was like using a vending machine to perform surgery. He gave me room, I filled it, and Blake, I saw him once. Elevator lobby. He nodded, tight-lipped, holding a cardboard box with his name sharpied on the side. I didn't smile, didn't smirk, just met his eyes for a beat longer than necessary. That was enough. He looked away first. Later that afternoon, Ubi approached my office holding a stack of onboarding papers. She asked if I wanted anything updated in my bio for the internal directory. I took the paper, grabbed a red pen, and crossed out a line that read retired, April. Then I wrote underneath, reinstated on her terms. The hallway outside my door stayed unusually quiet that week. People walked softer, spoke in lower tones. Like they were afraid of waking something they hadn't respected the first time around. And everywhere I went, meetings, audits, strategy sessions, I carried the binder. Nobody laughed. It hit the internal feed at 6:44 a.m. on a gray Tuesday no one would remember, except for one headline. Resignation announcement Blake R. Strategic advisor no spin. No quote, no farewell message, just a timestamp and a sentence. He was gone. There wasn't even a thank you for your service. And that silence, that was the applause. Few smirks passed around Slack channels, buried under harmless gifs. But no one said his name aloud. Not anymore. Blake had become something between a cautionary tale and a case study, whispered over lunch like a ghost in dress shoes. The resignation barely made ripples, but the summit, that made waves. Langston had opened the annual leadership summit in Chicago with his usual tie-less formality, hands clasped behind his back like a monk who once believed in efficiency over experience. This time, though, he didn't talk about growth forecasts or platform integrations. He told a story. No names, no finger-pointing. Just a quiet parable about how sometimes companies confuse motion for progress. There was a time, he said, voice carrying through the glass atrium, when we believed everything analog was obsolete. That speed was worth more than memory. New meant better, he let that sit. Then we found a binder on a shelf. Page 1 contained everything we'd forgotten, not because it was lost, because we never bothered to ask where it was filed. The room fell still. Someone clicked a pen nervously. Langston smiled, just a little. Sometimes, he said, the most modern solution is listening before deleting. Applause, real this time. And when it died down, I walked up, slow, steady, binder in hand. Not the old one. New one, clean, matte gray. My handwriting, still neat after all these years, waiting just inside. Langston accepted it without a word. He opened to the first page, page 1, what we forgot to respect. Then he looked up, not at the audience, at me. I gave him a nod, just one, then turned and walked off stage. No speech, no curtain call, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. And as I left that room, 100 executives watched in silence, eyes fixed on the binder, now resting in Langston's hands like a relic and a roadmap all at once. They'd never know how many sticky notes it held, or how many red flags were quietly woven into the margins. But one thing had changed forever. No one dared throw them out again. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.